Hey, Rock Valley Chapel, Pastor Tim here again, working through our Bible study in the book of Ecclesiastes. I want to welcome you to this segment. We are in Ecclesiastes chapter 8, and we're going to begin with verse 10 and go to the end of the chapter. And so let me just read this text to you. This is 8 verses, and then make a few comments. Again, reading from the English Standard Version. Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy place and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This also is vanity. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked. Neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God. There is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this also is vanity. And I commend joy, for man has no good thing under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. When I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep. Let me reread that. Verse 16. When I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out. Well, we've got a few things in here that are new, a couple of things that have been repeated prior in our study, but like all good teaching, and our teacher, Solomon, Kohelet, is a good one. All good teaching includes repetition, and especially at a time where you might not expect it. And so let's take a look at a few things. We have seen already the vanity or the injustice that's associated with wicked people being treated well and righteous people not being treated well. Wicked people being blessed and righteous people not being blessed. We've talked about that. It's certainly a key question that we see in the book of Job and in various Psalms as well. And it refers to something called theodicy, which asks the question about God's justice. Is God just in allowing righteous people to suffer and in allowing wicked people to prosper? It's a good question that never gets answered in the Bible and simply leads us to the incomparable, inscrutable nature of our God, who has a plan for all things. And at the end of the day, which is reaffirmed in our passage today, those who fear God will do well. So let me just look at a couple of things here. We see in verse 10 that it is a vanity that a wicked man who's done wicked things all of his life gets praised, probably at his funeral. This is probably what it's talking about. And Solomon sees that as vanity. How is it that such a thing can happen? Then we see in verse 11 that when evil deeds do not go punished, it simply promotes more evil deeds because people think they can get away with it. And so we see this happen in our society a lot when justice takes a long time to meet itself out, to do what it's supposed to do, to bring the right condemnation, or if justice even shows up at all on the occasion of unrighteous activities, it just breeds more and more unrighteous activities. And when we as a nation ensconce terrible laws such as abortion and make them legal, it just basically sends a strong message to those who want to try to skirt around various moral obligations and try to find ways to amplify those kinds of ungodly, unbiblical, unholy activities. And so We see this happen in our own society in a variety of ways, and I could keep going on the list of things, but it is clear that when evil deeds go unpunished, it will simply promote more evil deeds. Same thing we can say in our households. We can make it a little bit more closer to home, as it were. Parents that do not discipline their children are simply telling their children they can get away with all kinds of activities, and they are not preparing their children to be the kind of adults that are going to fear the Lord and certainly benefit society. So we're reminded in verse 13 that it will not go well with the wicked, but it will go well with those who fear God, because in the end, God does have the final say when it comes to judgment. And I think we even have an allusion to that in verse 13, where Solomon is trying to indicate that even though the wicked, who we've just talked about, has had a prosperous life and even has people remembering them in good terms at their funeral, they will not pass judgment, and their lives will not be extended, which seems to be some kind of an indication that there will be an ultimate judgment. And ultimately, those who fear the Lord will be blessed and welcomed into his presence for eternity, and those who have rejected God and his statutes will not. So it's a bit of an allusion in verse 13. It might be taking license to say that this is a reference to heaven and hell, but I think there's sufficient warrant there to suggest that Solomon wants us to know that even after we die, we're not off scot-free if we're wicked people. And those who fear the Lord are going to be blessed in some way. And he does use language later on in this book that seems to imply that he's mindful of a final judgment. So I don't think it's out of bounds to suggest that this may at least be hinting or pointing us towards a teaching that will come a little later. Then we come down to verse 14, and we've seen this. It's a vanity that there are righteous people who suffer like the wicked should, and just the reverse is the case. And he says once again, this is all vanity. So as a result of the fact that we can't possibly, I shouldn't say that, we can't probably expect that good things will come to those people who do the right things. We can't necessarily expect that. And in fact, we might, because of the sinful inclination of our hearts, the sinful disposition of this world, we might expect that our righteous deeds, more times than not, will still bring upon unfortunate circumstances. So life is not fair, basically. And as a result of life not being fair, verse 15, Solomon says he commends joy. And here again we have him say that there's nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be joyful in the toil that God gives us. Now once again, this is not hedonistic. This is not something that says eat, drink, and be merry for tomorrow we die. It has nothing to do with that, because he does say at the end of this verse that we are to enjoy the days and the toil that God has given us under the sun. There is a recognition that all that we have is from God. Our toil is from God. Our health is from God. Our food is from God. All that we have is from God, and it's intended to be enjoyed, especially in light of the fact that life is not fair. We can do all the right things, work hard, get training, and unfortunate things can happen to us. And by contrast, people who are lazy, people who are wicked, can seem to be incredibly blessed, and it just doesn't seem fair. So as a result of the lack of fairness that we experience in life, Kohelet says, learn to enjoy that which you have, your work, your food, your clothing, your family, your home, the simple things in life. Enjoy them, because life is fleeting and it's unfair. So enjoy that which you have. Finally, we see in verse 16 that there's this lesson on seeking out wisdom to try to understand what's happening in the world. And we see at the end of verse 16 that there's not a lot of sleep for those who continue to think and ponder about life and what seems to be going on and why things don't seem to work out well. It's a vanity to continue to try to see if you can figure out how everything fits together. There's a really nice quote in one of the commentaries that I look at by a guy named J. Stafford Wright, and he says this, and I think in light of our situation now where we're at home and we have more time to think, more time to ponder, which can certainly be a good thing, It can also be a negative thing in a sense. Listen to what he has to say. The more capacity one has for thinking things out, the more one is puzzled by the apparent meaninglessness of life. So humans must be content to take the pieces of life, one by one, without being able to fit them, past, present, or future, into the plan that he knows there must be. That's really well said. The more time we have, the more we can reflect on the meaningless of life, the seeming meaningless of life. When we look around and we see things just don't fit together. This just doesn't make sense. Even this virus that we're enduring, it doesn't make sense that just 2-3 months ago, we had no idea what life would look like now in April. And we have no idea what life will look like in August. We know we have stay-at-home orders now in Wisconsin that go to the end, basically to the end of May. And it could be that by the time we get to the end of May, they'll be extended again. It could be that we'll be in some kind of quarantine state or status for the next year. We simply don't know. And so the more we ponder and think about how things come together, how they should come together, the more we end up seeing what our author calls the meaningless of life. But of course, he doesn't mean life is meaningless. We know that life is not meaningless. We know that life offers a particular purpose for those who follow Jesus. And this is what, in part, I was trying to get at in Sunday's message, quoting from Romans 8:28. For we know that all things work together for those who love God, for those who are called according to his purpose. God has a purpose for those who have been called to follow him. And the purpose is to create a people that will glorify him. Create a people that will tell the world about him. Create a people that will let the world know that we live in a sin-laden world, that we are sinners, and there is a rescue plan, and that rescue plan is to trust in Jesus. We all have a purpose. Life is not meaningless for those who follow the Lord. Life has purpose and joy, and it will go well with those who submit and fear the Lord, because again, that is the beginning of wisdom, it is the beginning of life, and it is the beginning of our future heavenly reward. So as we think in our homes and ponder and maybe get to that point of seeing how it just doesn't all come together in a seemingly meaningful way, be reminded that by virtue of the fact that you know and trust Jesus, that you've repented of being a sinner, that you seek to follow him and glorify him, that you do indeed have meaning to God. You have meaning to the church. You have meaning to yourself. And we all have a purpose, and that is ultimately to glorify God. So I pray you'll take an opportunity now after you've listened to this message to think about ways that you can glorify God this day. God bless you guys. We'll see you next time.